one of the challenges now is that there are so many people that are new to church. Discipleship is rough. There are so many ones, and we need more 99s to lead the way for the ones.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Churches podcast. We're here to give you practical wisdom and insight into leading your church and aligning to the Great Commission. And we have a really great conversation coming up today, but before we jump in, I just want to remind everybody that the Intentional Churches Conference is coming up this April. At IC, we believe that the Great Commission should be a personal mission statement for everyone in your church, and this is the heart behind the conference. The conference is designed with your whole team in mind, so make sure you visit intentionalchurches.com/podcast for all the details and to register there. Well, like I said, we've got a great episode today, and as usual, I'm joined by my good friend Doug Parks. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, Erin and Lou, we're great. It's going to be a great conversation, man. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, we've got Lou Pizzichillo with us.
Did you
Lou,
say it right?
Did I say it right?
That was good. Right on the money. 10 out of 10.
Woo! All right, let's go. Lou,
Yeah.
why don't you just give us a brief intro about yourself? Just for our listeners, just give us a little context to who you are.
Sure. So I am in a village called Babylon on Long Island, and that's not a joke. That's
Really?
Wow.
For real. Yeah.
Who in history would say, let's name our town Babylon?
I know. And it's great. Every time the city comes up in a passage we're reading in church, everybody like cheers, and it's like,
That is
it's not really a good thing
hilarious.
to be known as Babylon.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's exciting. But so yeah, I'm in Babylon. That's on the south shore of Long Island, and I've been on Long Island my whole life, just about, except for a few years. And we, my wife Allie and I started community church in January of 2020 with our kids,
Wow.
Mia and Logan, because they're along for the ride as well.
Great timing, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was another just real highlight of the whole process.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being here. I have a clarifying question. What does it mean that you're in a village?
Okay. Yeah. So Long Island's a little bit unique. We have, for the most part, other than the boroughs in the city, we have two main counties, Suffolk and Nassau. And then within those counties, there are townships, but nobody really talks about their township. So there's like Brookhaven, but nobody would say they're from Brookhaven. And then they have little hamlets. That's what they call them.
Wow.
Or villages. And that's where if someone says, what town are you from? It's like technically a hamlet or a village. But the town, more officially, is really like the township. I think I'm getting that right. But it's a little different than the whole rest of the country. So
That is crazy.
I just learned something new. I didn't have no idea, man.
yeah, it doesn't make much sense. But
It doesn't make much sense. A hamlet.
I've never thought about living in a hamlet. I've never even thought about that. So, okay.
yeah. Yep.
Wow, you learn something new every day. I was actually going to ask you to give us a little bit of context just of Long Island in general. Like, give us some cultural realities of what it's like to live in Long Island, do ministry in Long Island. Like, just help us set the scene for us and our listeners.
Sure. So Long Island is, when people say Long Island, though part of the city is technically on Long Island, really they're talking about the two counties, Nassau and Suffolk, which is most of the island. And those are pretty suburban. A lot of people picture a concrete jungle, much like Queens or Brooklyn, but it's not. People have backyards and homes, and there aren't real tall buildings. But everybody's in a rush, just like they are in the city. And the pace is fast. People are familiar with church, especially because of the influence of the Catholic Church here. A large part of the population here can trace their ancestry back to Ellis Island when they came over when they crossed the ocean. So a lot of population's Italian or Irish, and both of those groups are very tied to the Catholic Church. And so there are a lot of Catholic churches here, and a lot of people, they say everyone's a little bit Italian on Long Island. It's not technically true, but that's what they say. It's just because of the pizza. Why they say that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So then based on some of that context, give us context of your church, the church that you and your wife, planted and lead together. Just maybe give us the story of how that came to be and kind of just describe the church as it is today.
Well, to give you a little bit of background about me, like I grew up with like very close to the Catholic Church, so I'm half Irish, half Italian. So I'm pretty like Long Island through and through. And I was baptized in the Catholic Church, um, and so were my parents. But when I was around third grade, they transitioned out of the Catholic Church into Protestant church, a more evangelical church, and like I watched that, but wasn't really on board with it. I respected it, but I didn't really, buy into it. And um, like for me, there was just a lot that I didn't understand. I got lost a lot in the terminology and in some of the rituals because even the church that they were involved in was a little bit more traditional. And that, well, like when things finally started to make sense for me in college, uh, that's where this idea of starting a church came from. Yeah, I felt like I need a church that I wanted to start a church that I needed when I was growing up, like one that kind of made things simple for me, in everyday language, because there was a lot of things I was familiar with. I'd heard the name of Jesus. I knew about baptism, knew about the Bible. Everybody knows about it. But yeah, but things didn't really make much sense and it wasn't all that appealing. So then fast forward, we started this church in January of 2020, and we say we're a church for people who don't go to church. Here on Long Island, just to say another piece about the context, a lot of people, okay, so most people, their grandparents went to church every Sunday. Their parents may have gone to church every Sunday, but they no longer go to church on Sunday. So there's still this deep part of people that feels like going to church is a good thing. Like grandma would be proud if I went to church. And so people are, when they see that it makes sense, they have been drawn to it. So we started in January of 2020 with that in mind, trying to set this church up for people who don't go to church. And we were open for 10 weeks and then we shut down because of COVID. We didn't see that coming. And
Totally.
that was a curveball. And for 52 weeks, we basically did services online. And
Wow.
we were able to do community groups. Yeah, I learned how to color grade and edit videos and talk to an empty room.
Sounds like
But
awesome ministry.
yeah, it was rough. It was rough,
Oh, I'm
and
sure you probably were depressed, were you?
it was dark and lonely. But I mean, everybody was going through some form of that. The thing that was unique to us, I think, is when people would ask how things were going, like if I was talking to other pastors and they'd say, "How are things going with people in your church?" My answer was, "I don't know because I don't know them." Like we only had 10 services. And so that was rough. But then we opened up a year later, like we called it a relaunch, and then we basically tried to frame it as a launch again. And then since then, things have gone really well. It's been a lot. There's been a lot of adjusting. We've really relied on the coaching from intentional churches, especially over the last year. But yeah, now things are going well. We do 3 services on Sunday, and we do 1 on Thursday night. And turnout's been great. It's been very, very exciting.
So much to unpack already, man. Because I'm just thinking about so many of our listeners. Like the first episode of this season, we had on Jim Sheldon, who's out in Ventura County, California, so the opposite coast of you, and similarly, a very insular community. Like not, it's hard to break in to what I'm assuming the same is true there, right? If you're not, you have Catholic heritage, either Irish or Italian, isn't it hard to break in? Like if I moved there, would it be hard for me to develop relationships?
Maybe. I definitely think it helps that people feel like he's
Okay.
one of us. And I do include a lot of my story in a lot of the messages on Sunday because of that. When people are like, "Oh, he gets this,"
Yeah.
that's
So
that's helpful.
is the phrase you use a church for people who don't go to church or don't like church?
Don't go to church.
Don't go to church. So tell us about like what unpack that. What is that real what were you trying to get across with setting that as the cultural norm from the get-go?
Yeah. So for us, it keeps the target. keeps the one, the target. When we write it out, we take the word for and we italicize it to really emphasize, like, we're a church. Like, the church part, the theological church part is in the first word, church, right? We're a church, a group of followers of Jesus who are for, like, advocates for, in favor of, on the side of those who don't go to church. And so because of that, on Sundays, especially because of the Catholic influence on Long Island, on Sundays, when people go looking for God, they go to a church service on a Sunday. And so we want to be ready for that. And so everything is kind of tailored to that. Not to say that we're not thinking about the person who has developed a relationship with Jesus on their own and is already there, but we make sure that, like, someone can walk out of a service not believing what's been taught, but I don't want them walking out not understanding what's been taught.
Kind of the heartbeat of IC, when we talk about personal ownership of the Great Commission, it really is activation of the individual believer, including the church leaders, in relational evangelism practice and activity. Mm-hmm. And so how have you brought that value to light? Because, for context, for a minute, I know people don't like answering this, but even though we're probably going to go back and unpack a little bit of the, COVID and all that, your church has grown very fast for a church on Long Island, has it not?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. How big are you right now?
Just over 1,000.
Average attendance is over 1,000. And how big is how many does your worship center seat?
250.
250. Okay. I just want our listeners to have some context of, what has happened there. And so if I go back to kind of the core of the question I was trying to get to, how did you, so I'm assuming that growth is, would you consider it conversion growth? Did it come from conversion growth? People bringing friends who don't know Jesus?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually and you can ask Jim, our IC coach. One of the challenges now is that there are so many people that are new to church. Discipleship is rough. Like, it's hard to develop a cohesive system of discipleship because there are so many ones, and we need more 99s to lead the way for the ones. So that's a challenge that none of us saw coming.
So you personally, how did you get to conviction around relational evangelism? And then secondarily, and I may need to come back to it, how did you get that in the core DNA of the church so powerfully? So how did you personally get to conviction around relational evangelism? And then how did you, as a church leader, get it there?
Long Island, and I'm sure most places are like this, but it's especially true on Long Island. People are very skeptical and they can smell BS a mile away. And so relational evangelism is really where people see whether or not you're real, whether or not you believe what you say you believe. And just looking back in my life, there are people that I've learned from platforms and great teachers and stuff like that. And it's been great. But really the most compelling, like the things in my life that were the most persuasive when it came to following Jesus were just people that I knew, and watching them live out what they said they believe. That was what was big for me. And so we're really big here on authenticity. We say, like, one of our values is you can be flawed, but you can't be fake. And so you can have doubts. You've got permission to be in progress, like all of that stuff. So people feel like they don't have to put on a show. But also what it's also teaching people is in their own lives, they don't have to wear their like Christian hat and all of a sudden act like everything's perfect. But to be real with people and be, open and express their doubts and how they're trying to trust God with certain things and struggling in other areas. And we've seen people really drawn to that. That's what I needed. And really, that's what we see working here. For our team, the way that we got that into the minds of our team members when we started with our launch team meetings before things got going, really what we leveraged was the idea of the one. The way I phrase it, I'd say, like, there is somebody in your life that you want to go to church. And we want this to be a place where, like, that 1 week where they're like, okay, this week I'm coming, or this week I hit rock bottom, or this week I'll give it a try. Fine, because I have nothing to do. That 1 week they give it a shot. We want you to know that we're ready, and we want to be ready for them. So because everybody who believes has that version of somebody in their minds, that's where we saw ownership happen. And then after that, the stories just flooded in. One thing that we did from the start, just on a super, super practical level, we used Slack. Slack had, I think they have a free thing still. If they don't, we got grandfathered in. But everyone who volunteers at the church is in Slack. And we have a channel called Stories. And that's where people can go on. They don't get notified. We said it's that people's phones aren't like chiming all the time. But if someone invited someone, like we'll see pictures of text chats. People have like, look, my cousin said that they're coming, or they came and they loved it and they're coming back next week. And so it's just constantly, what's the word? Like affirming all of that stuff and celebrating it and keeping the main thing the main thing.
Did you get that from somebody else? First time I've ever heard that strategy about
Slack.
Yeah, using Slack in that manner. I've never heard that before. That's the first time.
It happened on accident. In the beginning, when our launch team was small, I was emailing and it felt clunky and nobody could respond. And then I heard about Slack, and there were maybe like 12 of us when we first started. And then we realized the value of starting different channels. So now everyone uses Slack. We have a main channel where all the main announcements go, everyone on the team, that is. But then there's a kids channel, there's a production channel, there's a groups channel, and then we have a stories channel where people can just jump on there and share their stories. And that's my favorite.
I want to caution, this may be old guy moment. The technology is not the silver bullet. I want to say that to our listeners. That what I'm hearing very clearly, you're using technology to provide infrastructure to cultivate the culture and the DNA you want in your people. And then I can't imagine, Luke, do you go harvest if you want to go do an interview or like pull somebody on stage or like highlight? You've got a treasure trove, right? If people are feeding that channel all the time with stories.
Yeah, I mean, I have a folder in the Notes app on my phone. I just call it Stories, and every text, everything that goes up in Slack, everything people say, I just write it real quick and just boom, like save it into Stories, because what do they say? Like what gets celebrated gets replicated, or something like that. But if you, it's like ammunition, really,
Yeah, one of the things we learned early on is the power of storytelling to replicate, like you're saying, the kind of culture that you desire. And when we first started out on our journey of really trying to mobilize people to reach the people in their lives, we wanted to tell stories and we had no stories to find. It's like, who's got a story? People are looking at us like, you're insane. What do you mean a story? A story about what? And it took us getting some momentum of celebrating things intentionally in a particular direction. And now we have more stories than we know what to do with, but that takes time. And so one of the things we have celebrated, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this in your context, is we have celebrated becoming a storytelling culture. And we think about that in a couple different contexts. Yes, telling the stories of people who are reaching their ones, reaching those who are close to them but far from God, but also becoming a people who can share our own stories with others, like the story of transformation God's writing in us. People who can share the stories of Jesus, the stories of Scripture. And so, even when we think about like our kids programming, the craft that our kids do on the weekends is called a storyteller, because the whole goal is that it would help them tell the story that they learned to someone in their life. And so for us, like in becoming a people who make disciples, we have just learned the power of story in a lot of different directions. So I just wonder, like, it's amazing that you guys are like harvesting all these epic stories. Like, how have you learned or seen that change and shape your culture, like the power of story?
They get told over and over again. And there are so many stories, and somebody can find themselves in every story, And so there are stories that have kind of become, I don't know, they have like a gold star next to them. Like they just keep coming up, or it's a story we tell over and over again. But it's helped people find their place, feel validated in their struggle, and just know, like, we're human beings. We look for belonging, and there's something about a story that gives people a sense of belonging. Like, oh, I get that. I feel that. That's me. Or, someone tells a story about their cousin who came to church. They never thought their cousin would come to church, and then they do, and now they come, they join the team. And there's people like, well, my cousin like that's them, but they're not there yet, and so it gives hope. And so stories have been big for us. Real quick, there are so we were given a property from a church that closed down right as we were about to launch. And so it's a pretty crazy story in itself. But there are a group of people there that are older, probably about 20 or 30 people, who were invited to join our launch team. Some did, some didn't. But they were skeptical at first because it was very, very different from what they were used to. But there was one couple in particular that they just like every week they had questions, and they were always asked like in a very gentle way, but like, things like it just wasn't always so smooth with them. And then one week the guy pulls me aside. His name's Joe. He comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, just want to let you know, when we launched this church, I told my nephew about it." And he just kind of said like, "Okay, yeah, great. He's Catholic, my nephew." He said, "Okay, great." And then, I never heard from him again. And then about 12 weeks later, he said, "You were doing something to explain communion." And so I sent it to him again because I know that, he's Catholic and maybe there's a connection point. And he responded and he said, "I've already listened to that message. I've been listening since the church started." And the guy looked at me and he was like, "I get it now." And the reason he got it was because this was his one, and his one was learning, and he had no idea about it. And so that's one of those stories when people are like, "I'm not totally sure about this." Those are the stories that we tell, like there's somebody in your life that's probably like that. And we want to be the church that you can come to that speaks their language.
That's good. That's powerful. Lou, for you, how about a story of a one in your life personally? That's not organizational, but the story of somebody that is close to you but far from God, that you're investing in.
Yeah. So right now, there's a group of guys that I see 5 days a week. We play basketball at LA Fitness at 6 a.m. And the investment is not super spiritual. It's just, we're just on the same team. And I try to let the way that I play, whatever, obviously not hurt the relationship. But I think it's good for them to know I'm the pastor of the church down the street. I'm also not afraid to give them an elbow if they need one, and they see that like authenticity, and I think, I'm hoping that there'll be a day where they're like, "Okay, we're not doing anything this Easter, or this Christmas or whatever." You have kids programs there, just kind of let the conversations happen naturally. Um, those are the guys that I'm investing in, and some are more interested in others. At first, I didn't tell them I was a pastor because that makes things weird. So I wanted them to know I was a regular guy first, and I got away with it for a few months, and then somebody blew my cover, and so now I'm trying to work from there. But those are my guys. It's been years. So maybe that's helpful. It's been years, and one of them came once on Christmas Eve last year. So I'm still investing in them.
Are you any good?
At
I'm
basketball?
okay. Okay, I'm
I'm
5'6".
okay.
I'm 5'6", so that
You're
doesn't help.
5'6", so you're guard. All right, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I just think this, we've just gotten so programmed over the years to think about relational evangelism as projects and as transactional. And, it's just the subconscious in many, many, many believers that I just can't applaud you enough for holding up the banner of we're playing the long relational game when we're personally owning the Great Commission. There isn't a segmented part of our life where we go over here and do God's business separate from the context of the rest of my life. So just applaud you on it, man. I want to come back to the launch and how we're not about. Here's what I would say about numbers and attendance. If we are doing the right things and people are beginning to own and activate around the personal ownership of the Great Commission, growth in some of these areas is a byproduct. It's a lag of that. Now, we can do other things that are very institutional and drive those lag indicators. We can, put on a big show or something that somebody wants to come and consume. But when this natural thing that we're talking about, personal ownership of the Great Commission happens, growth is a byproduct. And I want to kind of walk through some of the things you've had to problem solve along the way. How quickly did growth come once you relaunched? Do you use the word relaunched in 21? How quickly did you, what was your core group and what were you within 6 months or so?
Core group was maybe about 50. I really don't remember off the top of my head. And there were right after that, March 2021, we were still not out of the woods. So there were ups and downs, ups and downs. Christmas Eve, we almost had to cancel because everybody got COVID on our staff. I went and lived in a hotel for a week alone because my kids and my wife got COVID. And so, so there was some ups and downs in the beginning, but maybe we were about 200. And there are some factors like for our growth, it's not all because we have some magic bullet. There are some things that have just gone our way. We were given a property, and on Long Island where people see church as an establishment, the property gave us credibility immediately. And that's just something that just went our way, So yeah, things took off pretty quickly in the beginning.
Did you have any issues in that first 6 months to a year where you would have to fight for DNA and culture, where other Christians were showing up and kind of sidetracking you at all?
Oh yeah, always.
Tell us the story and how you navigated through it.
Yeah, so we give them like genuine. Okay, so sometimes we're just not the church for you. Sometimes people, I don't know, can't stand the sound of my voice or whatever it may be. That's just the case. I mean, we're not the church for everybody, and that's why there's so many different churches. And it's a beautiful thing. But what I think I undervalued going into it is the value of a great conversation. And there are a lot of genuine people who really just needed to know why. And as a young, dumb church planter, which I still am, there's part of me that's like, oh, here are people that are trying to stop me and get in my way and you want to just play the victim and whatever. But the reality is there were so many really well-intentioned people that just didn't quite get it at first. And spending time with them and getting them to understand it has been incredibly helpful for us, because the reality is, especially from a giving standpoint, the 99s pay for the one. The one may start to follow Jesus, but their wallet comes last usually. And so I think, and some you might disagree, I think it's easier to get a devoted follower of Jesus on board with your unique expression of ministry than it is to get somebody who doesn't follow Jesus at all to be completely devoted to him. You know what I mean? And so we've seen a lot of value. Like, we're stronger as a team when somebody who already follows Jesus buys into what we're doing. So all that to say, there's a lot of value in having that conversation. That said, after the conversation, after we've explained why, I just try to kindly give them permission to leave, and just say, this may not be for you. Like, if you don't have a cousin who you want to see in church, or you are sick and tired of me talking to the new people every single week, or saying, Paul was somebody who started lots of churches in the ancient world. If you're tired of me saying that every week, then this might not be the place for you. And that's okay. That doesn't make you less of a Christian. But giving them the freedom to do that takes pressure off me and pressure off of them, And so there are often times where I have to redirect and remember, okay, no, this is who we're after. This is because the ones don't complain. They just don't show up, or they leave, and you never know. The 99s are loud, and they're amazing.
They are very loud,
but they speak up more than the ones do.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. I think a lot of Christians, especially when you bring them back to core key scriptures and say, what is this really saying? They may have it memorized, but what is this really saying about how I should be living my life? I've seen many Christians come to conviction. Erin, I'm going to throw it to you to ask kind of the same question, because I know this is getting Christians on board has been quite fun for you at times, right?
Yeah.
So, how would you answer kind of the same question of how Lou and his team, we're going to take time and try to get them there, but if not, this isn't the church for you. Share with us.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we experienced in COVID was I realized quickly that many on our teams were trying to chase church people that didn't want to be chased. And so, for example, you have group leaders who, our groups team would reach out to them 3, 4 times and not hear anything back. And so we had to come to this place where we had to decide we need some standards and some boundaries around how we're going to go after the 99, because we're giving a lot of effort and a lot of energy to chasing down people in the 99 who don't want to be chased. Like, if they wanted to be found, they would have responded to you the first or second time. And so putting some things in place to give our staff people permission. I think a lot of our staff felt like, well, I'm not doing my job if I don't pursue the people of the church. It's like, we don't have to neglect the people of the church. We also don't have to give all of our effort and energy to chasing them down. And so I think there was just some assumptions being made about my job is to make contact with all of the people in my span of influence, my span of care. And it's like, no one's asking you to do that. And that's taking up energy that could be used to pursue the one, or to help empower those in the 99 who do want to be pursued, who do want to be trained and equipped to pursue their ones. And so for us, part of it that I've been reflecting on recently was like just a focus of energy. You can spend all your energy pursuing and chasing and going after the 99 and giving people permission on your team to go after the one.
Yeah, that's good. Lou, I'd like, and Erin, I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit, because I hear you saying, Lou, we have so many ones, and I appreciate you being vulnerable about it. Like, the discipling function of how do we begin to mature them to owning the Great Commission personally themselves is a struggle or a challenge right now. Can you just let us into how you're thinking about it right now? Like, we've got all these new believers. What the heck are we going to do with them all to get them moved and keep the core DNA that we've established? So how are you thinking about it right now? Maybe give us your top 2 or 3 strategies you've thought about. Just let the listeners in on how you're thinking about this challenge, because it's a unique challenge for a lot of churches.
Sure. So, one thing we start with up front, we say this from the front often, is you have permission to be in progress. So you can start to believe, but not be 100% all in on every, in and out of theology and discipleship, and giving people permission to do that. And also our staff knowing, like, hey, they're in progress, let's celebrate the progress that they've made, rather than having this caricature of what a perfect Christian looks like and the boxes that they check. And like, okay, they got baptized and they said they believe, but they're still not doing all this stuff. Like, okay, just kind of looking at the examples of the disciples and how long it took them to get it. It's like, all right, let's be gentle with our people. So not like forcing them to like complete the sanctification process in a week because they got baptized on Sunday. With that in mind, we also try to we're trying to tailor a discipleship approach. So I have taken a few groups through Practicing the Way. We've got beta groups. It's a new curriculum by John Mark Comer. We have these beta groups. So we're just trying it. And what I've got is the most Long Island people that are new to church. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. We meet
What
my
does
office.
that mean? What does that mean? The
I
most
don't know.
Long Island.
They just, no church before this, rough around the edges, super genuine people with a genuine desire to grow in their faith. Eat a lot of pizza, bagels, and they're nice on the inside, but they got a tough exterior, That's Long
Thank
Island.
you. Keep going. I love the idea. We try to highlight this a ton in this network of intentional churches. Like, we need to be piloting and testing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that you're beta testing. Tell us more about how that's going.
Yeah, so, we just create a very safe environment. And what I tell the guys is, hey, well, I want to see if this works for our church. And so I need you to tell me when things sound weird, or if they don't make sense, or if it sounds inconsistent with the message that we preach on Sunday. And so it's been great. We had somebody else. There's a lady from our church that read the book, and she's another, very connected on Long Island. She gets people here. She read the book and went through and highlighted everything where she's like, this is going to need more explanation. This is going to need more explanation. And from there, we're still not totally sure what to do. But these have been really helpful insights. And it's not that any of the stuff written is wrong. It's that in the context when it's come up, I've been there when I'm around the table to explain, okay, here's what he means by this, right? So it's worked for those guys. We're trying that. We're about to start Rooted with a few beta groups. We're going to take our staff through it and try that. But really right now, I think it's probably also worth saying our church as a whole, we are great at getting people from 0 to 3. We are not nearly as good at getting people from 3 to 5, right? If I'm oversimplifying the discipleship process. And so we're trying to figure out that 3 to 5, but we're trying to figure out what it looks like for the person on Long Island.
There's a lot of churches that are good at 3 to 5, and I would think less churches who are good at 0 to 3, to continue with your metaphor. And so I just would encourage you. It's not wrong to be better at one part of that. We can learn a lot from what you and your church are learning. So thanks for sharing some of that.
And I have a great empathy, Lou, because I've been a part of a couple churches that grew at speed in Vegas back in the day, with ones who were like the hostess at a strip club. I mean, we're talking like we're starting way back.
Yeah.
And, the cautionary note I would give out of my experience for us all is be careful how you approach these strategies, and don't swing the pendulum back to knowledge equals discipling. And that I know you won't, but I want for our listeners, especially when you are starting to reach ones, and I'm hearing story after story of intentional church, a lot of these churches in this network, massive growth. I just talked to a church leader in West Virginia this week, Parkersburg, West Virginia, and he said we're up in our average we get attendance 20%, and they're ones, and it's created this tension you're feeling, Lou. I think a lot of church leaders are feeling. I just want to be that voice saying, remember, emulate what Jesus did. He discipled as they were active.
Mm-hmm.
As they were active. Otherwise, I think what I saw in my lifetime and what I've made mistakes in is you end up, if you swing the pendulum too far, you end up starting tipping people into consumerism of Jesus too much, Anyway, I know you're not going to do that, and this wasn't a chastising view. It was more for our listeners to say, hey, this is a real thing that I think we need to link arms together and pilot and test like you're doing. And I know, Erin, you guys are doing at Canyon Ridge to figure this out, because it's real. There is, I am going to say it, guys. I think there is revival in America right now. And it's going to take leaders like you guys, to help figure this one out.
Yeah, that's good. Lou, thank you so much for jumping in with us. It's been fun to hear more about you and villages, apparently. The village
Hamlet.
of Babylon, the hamlets,
Right.
all the things, but more than that, just the fun. It's just so fun to hear the journey your church has been on. A church for people who don't go to church. That's going to stick with me. I love that. So, well, thanks everyone for listening to the Intentional Churches podcast. If this podcast has been helpful to you, please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please share it with your church leader friends. This helps us as we grow and try to reach new leaders. And remember, the Intentional Churches Conference is this April. So make sure you visit intentionalchurches.com/podcast for all the details and to register. We'll see you next time.